our Football Friday talks that we're starting here this year at Penn State. We've got a couple of sponsors to thank. First of all, Mike Foreman should be up here doing this, but he told me he's a behind-the-scenes guy and forced me to come up and do it. So Mike has been invaluable in the support of the Bellisario College of Communication at Penn State. Our other sponsors are the Center for the Study of Sports and Society. My co-director, Steve Ross, was back there clapping away for Bellisario, so the center is involved in this as well. And Lou Lazaro is here with the Penn State All Sports Museum. Those are the three sponsors of our series this spring. I hope you were here early to see some previews of coming attractions. We, of course, I know you're eager to get to the two folks up on the stage and hear them tonight, but we've got some other good speakers coming in the semester. Doug Allen next week, an official from the PGA to talk about the Live PGA merger later in the semester. Dr. Kirk French to talk about the Tailgate Archaeology Project and booze and culture at Penn State. We've got the staff of the Collegian coming in at the end of the year to talk about how student journalists try to hold institutions accountable. So please come and join us. Fridays after home games here in Carnegie, thanks to the College of the Bellisario College. We hope to see you. The rest of them will be at 4 o'clock.
Well, Mark, I think they're excited to hear one speaker up here. I'm so sure they're excited to hear myself. My name is Brian Tripp. I work with Penn State Athletics doing on-air broadcasting with our football radio team, baseball, hockey, and a 2011 graduate of what was then the College of Communications from here at Penn State. And our featured speaker today is Todd Blackledge, who will be on the broadcast tomorrow night on NBC, debuting NBC's coverage of Big Ten football, 1982 national champion here at Penn State. 3 years started. I think what's great about this room, I can tell there's a lot of students out there, also some, I think, football fans coming to town that want to hear Todd's perspective. So we'll try to cover a bunch of different topics. But Todd, I think first, a great way to start would just be with your current role with NBC, and you've worked with almost every single network, with ABC and CBS in the past, but with NBC, what does a week look like as you come into town here on a Friday in advance of the game tomorrow night?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's great to be here. It's always fun for me to come back to Penn State. I really have not done that many broadcasts of Penn State games in my career. I've been doing this at the network level for about 30 years now. It's my first year with NBC, so it's always fun to come back and to open up this season, a season where Penn State has great expectation, and also in my new role with NBC, it's great. So, so typically for a Saturday game, I would leave where I'm living on Thursday, which is Charlotte right now, and come into town. We would have already done a Zoom call with the visiting team coaches, in this case West Virginia, and the head coach and offensive and defensive coordinators and a couple players, and then travel on Thursday, and usually would try to get into town in time to go to a Thursday afternoon practice. A lot of teams have changed the way they practice in the 30 years I've been doing this. So some, like West Virginia, practiced in the morning, so I had to leave on Wednesday to go see them on Thursday morning. And then Penn State really doesn't do much of anything on Thursday. They have a better practice to watch on Friday, so I went to practice today on Friday. But Friday is a very busy day anyway. We meet with the home team coaches, a couple players. I've got a couple meetings back at the hotel when I get back tonight to go over some production elements for the game. Then we'll have a production meeting at 10 o'clock in the morning and kind of just lay out the show. And then get to the stadium about 4 hours before kickoff and get locked in and get ready to call the game. So, and then fly home on Sunday and start all over again with 2 new teams next week.
when does your preparation really begin for a game? I'm sure as a student of the game, you're always following and reading news stories throughout the course of the year, but when do you really dive into the specific teams while also having an understanding of the national landscape of what's going on in college football?
Well, all through the spring and summer, I do a lot of reading and try to read current articles on the big picture of college football. And then when I knew I was going to be at NBC, I really became Big Ten centric and focused in on those teams and making sure I knew that. I actually went and visited 3 schools in the Big Ten West that got new head coaches this year, so I went and watched all 3 of them practice and met with the 3 coaches at Wisconsin and Purdue and Nebraska. And then, as we get closer to the season, I start to zero in on my individual games. And so my preparation for this game, because it was week 1, I could start more than a week ago, but I watch a lot of film, and I do most of my film work at home. Again, I've been doing this a long time, and when I first started, I had to wait till I got on campus to watch film, because I'd have to go into a coach's meeting room or a NFL scout room, use their film equipment, and usually spend all day and night Thursday watching film. But now I can download everything on my iPad and watch it anywhere I want. And so that has really helped me in my preparation. So I do a lot of work Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday watching film. And then when I get on site, it's more locked into the teams.
I think a really unique perspective to share with the audience here is then being that analyst and coordinating what you're seeing in the film into some of the graphics, the production that goes into the game, and then of course working with the rest of your broadcast team, who will be Noah Eagle and Catherine Tappan this year.
Yeah, and really, and I'm excited about our team. I've not worked a game with Noah. I'm 62 years old and Noah's 25 years old, so it's going to be a very interesting combination. He's mature beyond his years. He's very, very talented. His dad, Ian Eagle, is an accomplished broadcaster for CBS, and Noah is going to be a star in this business. He's really, really good. And Catherine Tappan, she's kind of right in between us. She's been in this business a long time. In fact, she's never done a Penn State game. The only time she was ever on campus here, she was a track star at Rutgers, and so she was here competing as a track athlete. It was the only other time she was at Penn State. So she did a lot of years for Notre Dame football. She's excited to be in the Big Ten and to be here. And all of our roles are different, so our preparation is different. Like, I watch a ton of film. I don't think they watch nearly as much film, if any. They might watch some game copies. Noah will read a lot of articles with the personal stories about individual players. Catherine, she's been amazing this week. We just left Penn State's practice. She was outside on the phone with Drew Aller's mom and dad, who were driving up here from Medina, talking to them. She talked to Olu's parents. She talked to, a bunch of different people during the week that we don't talk to, that Noah and I don't. So she's got other stories to bring to light during the course of the game. Of course, she works the hardest because she's on the field going back and forth between 2 sidelines and trying to cover stories of both teams. So we all kind of prepare the same way. We'll all bring, what we've gathered during the week to a meeting tonight and that 10 o'clock meeting tomorrow, and then, then let it fly. And really, the reality is the game is still the show, right? I mean, the game is the star. It's not us. It's not our stories. It's not what we've done preparation-wise. We want a great game, and then we want to document a great game. And a lot of times, really, where all that preparation and the stories really come in is if the game becomes one-sided, and you need to have other things to talk about. But if the game is good, that's the story. And you follow and document the game and find a way to weave some of your stories in. But what's happening on the field is first and foremost.
I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this, but just because she was talking to Drew Aller's mom doesn't mean he's the starting quarterback, right?
Oh, no, that doesn't mean And we don't know who West Virginia's starting quarterback is either.
Todd, I want to get into your background, how you got into the industry. And you just shared a great story in the green room over there. The first time that you had your broadcasting chops tested was when you were the quarterback at Penn State going into the 1982 Sugar Bowl.
Yeah, it was funny. We were practicing here in State College, getting ready to go to New Orleans for the Sugar Bowl. And Dave Baker, who was our old sports information director, came up to me and he said, hey, ABC wants to do something different. They would like to have you for Penn State and Herschel Walker for Georgia introduce the starting lineups. And rather than doing the standard headshots and all that, they wanted to see if you'd do it. I said, sure, I'll do it. So they were going to come up like on Saturday. This was Wednesday when they told me. I remember Friday I was at a basketball game, a youth basketball game here in town, and I was just sitting in the stands and I was memorizing, height and weight, hometown of all the guys on my starting offense. I wanted to make sure I had all my T's crossed and I's dotted. So we show up Saturday morning at the practice field. We're all in a coat and tie. It's a cold day. And we walk out there, and the producer, he pulls me aside and he says, hey, look, we've never done this before. We want to see if it can be something fun. What we don't want height and weight. we can do that ourselves. We want something to be loose and fun. And so now I'm like, what am I going to do? So they handed me a mic, and they started rolling the camera, and I just started walking down the line, saying stuff, whatever popped in my head. And a lot of it was inside joke stuff that only my teammates got, and some people thought it was funnier than other guys. Some of it was a little bit mean, but it was fun. And I did it in one take, and went right down the line, and they used it. And so what I was telling them in there before, so where they used it in the game was right after the coin toss, and we won the toss, and we're taking the ball, and so how I ended it when I did it, when we filmed it, I said, and that's the starting lineup for the Sugar Bowl and the offense that's going to do a number on the Georgia Bulldogs. So they used it in the game right after, and Keith Jackson's calling the game, the famous Keith Jackson, and he says, and the man that's going to pull the trigger for the Nittany Lions is going to introduce the starting lineups. So they run this tape, and after I said what I said, it goes back to Keith, and he just said, he hopes. Unfortunately, we scored on the first possession, and so it all played out good. We never trailed in the game, even though Georgia cut the deficit a couple times. But that was the first thing I ever did in front of the camera or anything like that, and kind of felt like, okay, I think I can maybe do this. And it really wasn't until after my playing career was over that I really got a taste of it and a start in anything. But that was the very first thing I ever did.
Was that the most memorable game of your playing career?
So I have 3 games, 3 Penn State games that stand out in my memory for all time. The first one was, there were 2 in my senior year and then 1 in my junior year. So my senior year, actually I would say 4, because my first start, when I made my first start on the road against Missouri, in Columbia, Missouri, against a really good team, that was memorable, in 1980. In 1981, we beat Pitt in the old Pitt Stadium, 48-14. We were ranked #1 and had a great team, and that was very memorable. We were down 14-0 at the end of the first quarter and scored 48 unanswered points to win. And then my senior year in week 4, we played. It was interesting because one of the reasons I took this NBC primetime package was because I love primetime games. I love doing primetime games at ESPN. It just looks bigger, feels better, bigger, sounds bigger, right? So here we are here for the first primetime game for NBC. And so 4th game of the season, my senior year, we played Nebraska here. And it was considered the first night game at Penn State, but they brought in portable lights. They didn't have lights. And the game started at like 4:30 in the afternoon, but it finished in the dark. And that was a memorable game because they were really, really good, and we scored with 4 seconds left to beat them. And obviously that was the game we needed to win to be able to compete for a national championship. We lost to Alabama the next week, but we still were able to finish with 1 loss and play Georgia, and of course the Sugar Bowl would be the other game.
What were your thoughts going into that 82 season? Mike just shared a really great story that he wrote actually when he was a student here working with the Daily Collegian. And it starts, the first game, Joe Paterno is introducing Air Paterno for the 1982 season.
Yeah, well, part of that was in 1981, we had a great football team that I guess, in some ways maybe underachieved because of what we had on the team. I mean, we only lost 2 games. We lost to Alabama and we lost to Miami, Florida, down in Miami on Halloween night. But we had 2 first-round draft pick offensive linemen in Mike Munchak and Sean Farrell. We had a couple other highly regarded draftable offensive linemen. We had a really strong defense, but we came up short in a couple games. Now we finished incredibly strong. We beat Pitt, like I told you, when they were number 1. We went to the Fiesta Bowl. Marcus Allen had won the Heisman Trophy for USC. Our defense held him to under 100 yards. We beat them. I mean, it was, so we finished in the top 5, but, we probably could have competed for a national championship. So anyway, we lose a lot of those offensive linemen. What we did have coming back, we had a good group of skill people. I mean, I was returning, it'd be my 3rd year as a starting quarterback. Kurt Warner was the finest football player that I ever played with. Coming back at tailback, we had Jonathan Williams was another really good tailback. We had good receivers. Mike McCluskey was a good receiving tight end. So we started out the season throwing the football because we had a strength in throwing it, and that but we were still trying to get our running game going because Kurt was such a great player, but he got off to a slow start, and we were roommates. I'll never forget, we're living at Toff Trees together in our apartment, and he's taking heat from the media, like, what's wrong? I mean, I had seen how hard he worked in the summer, and the first 4 games, he never went over 100 yards, and coming into the season, he was going to be a Heisman candidate, but it took a while for our running game to come along, and so we beat Nebraska. We end up losing to Alabama that next game. And I think I threw a couple touchdowns, but I think I threw 3 or 4 interceptions in that game also. And we threw the ball 40 times, and it was almost like once that happened, Joe was like, all right, we got to get our running game going. So the next week we played Syracuse, and I think I threw the ball 13 times. And we had thrown a bunch in the first 5 games, but Kurt ran for about 150 yards. And from the rest of the season on, we became a very incredibly well-balanced team. And when we finished the season, this is a trivia question, if anybody ever gets asked this, when we won the national championship in 1982, we became the first team to ever win a national championship that gained more yards passing than rushing. We were the first one. And the difference was maybe 75 to 100 yards. It wasn't much, but we threw the ball really well, at a time when, we had not done that previously.
And obviously the big play in the 4th quarter that everyone sees the highlight of time and time again.
Yeah. Let me tell you something about that, Joe. I'll tell you that. No. So, I mean, Greg Garrity, makes the catch. So, first of all, leading up to that play, and Keith Jackson has a great call on that one too. Blackledge going for the bundle, Garrity, like that. Anyway, we had run 6 plays in a row prior to that play, and we had worked the ball out to right before midfield, running the football, and we called the place called 643 all go. So it's a play action fake out of the I formation, and everybody's running takeoffs. And Greg Garrity was such a good football player, and he looked like about a 40-year-old man when he was a senior in high school, but he was quicker and faster than people gave him credit for, really a good player. And he ran by their freshman cornerback and made a great diving catch in the end zone. And, that we never trailed, but that stretched the lead, and Georgia couldn't make a comeback. So here's the story I was going to tell you. So after the game, we finally won a national championship, right? And we're all just taking it in. Like nobody wanted to leave the field. We wanted to soak it all in. Penn State had undefeated teams. They had great seasons, but back then they voted for the national champion. And Penn State never got voted. So now, because we were number 2 and Georgia was number 1, it was like a de facto playoff. So we're champions. We're taking it all in. So now we go in the locker room, and we're doing the media and everything, which is not nearly as big as it is now, but we had to do our media. So we come back to the locker room, and Greg Garrity and I are the last 2 guys to finish with the media and get in the locker room. and get a shower, get dressed, put our suit back on. We both have a cigar. He's got the game ball. I've got the MVP trophy. And we go to walk out, and the buses had all left. Kid you not. Right? So I'm looking around, I asked Tim Shope, our old equipment manager, who sadly just passed away a couple months ago, or a month or so ago. And I said, Shope, what's the deal? Hey, you guys missed the bus. Yeah. Well, how are we going to get back to the hotel? Well, you can wait for the equipment truck, but they're not going to leave for about an hour. We had a party. I mean, they had a big thing planned for the team back at the hotel. We're not going to wait for an hour. So, being the smart, Penn State, soon-to-be graduates that we were, we walk out at midnight in a drizzle in downtown New Orleans, outside the Superdome, and start to hitchhike to get a ride back to the hotel. So, we're both in suit and ties, cigar, trophy, game ball, walking down the street, and a van stops and pulls up, and it's two guys and their sons, and they are from Tennessee, and they had come to watch the game, and they asked, you guys need a ride? And I said, yeah, we do, actually. So they took us, safely back to the hotel, dropped us off, thank you, man, I don't know if I can ever repay you, thank you so much. So anyway, I know this is a long story, but it's a good one, and it's a good finish to it also. That was a good finish. So now, fast forward.
Little do you know, that was the first Uber.
Yes, that's right. So just paid for it later. So now that's 1983, January 1, 1983. So in about 1995, maybe, I'm working for ABC, and I'm doing a studio with John Saunders, and maybe 95, 96, but Tennessee is going to play Florida State for the national championship game in the Fiesta Bowl, I think. And so we're going to take our studio show out there. ABC's doing the game, and John and I are flying out there. And, the week before we're getting ready to go, we're in the studio, and our PR guy comes down to the studio set. He's like, hey, he comes to me and says, do you know some guy named such and such? I'm like, I'm not really great with names, but I don't recall that name. He said, the guy has called here like 3 times. He's telling some story about he and his son picked you up. I said, absolutely that happened. That is a true story. Give me the guy's number. Let me call him. At least say thanks again. Well, it turned out he and his son, they're huge Tennessee fans. He was calling to see if there was any way I could help him get a ticket for the national championship game. So I ended up getting him 4 tickets for the game, and he and his friends came, and I had a reunion with them outside the set, however many years later, to pay back for that ride. So. I'm not sure how we top that story, or where we go next, but you were talking about the first night game ever played at Beaver Stadium, and this generation knows the whiteout, and the whiteout, the creator is Guido D'Elia. And we were talking before, it's something that's very valuable for you throughout your career, is having an honest mentor to go to. And Guido's known for his marketing arm and what he's done throughout his career, but also he's been really influential to you. He has been such a great friend and a great mentor. So he was my first boss in TV. So my last year playing in the NFL, I was with the Steelers in 1989, and I was living in Pittsburgh, and my dad, who was an assistant coach for the Steelers, had to undergo some cancer surgery, and so, I was kind of wanted to live there and help my mom take care of my dad, and I wasn't sure if I was done playing or if I was going to go to another camp or not, and I got a call. I think it was somebody here at Penn State first said, hey, there's a guy named Guido D'Elia. He's got a production company in Pittsburgh called Mind Over Media, and they produce our weekly Penn State football story. And he'd like you to be the studio host, if you'd like to do that. And so I said, well, I do think that's what I want to try to get into. That's the business I want to do. I've not done anything during my whole NFL career. I did some radio shows in Kansas City and different things here and there, but nothing serious. So I said, okay, I'll do it. So I met with Guido, had a really cool facility in downtown Pittsburgh in the Strip District. I mean, it was like super cool setup. And so in doing this show, it was an hour show, and they would bring the tapes in from the game, and like on a tape delay, we'd get the tapes from the TV station, and we would we would watch the tapes and do voiceovers, and I would do on camera. He taught me all the stuff about the business, doing on cameras, doing writing, doing voiceover, doing interviews with players, and so I did that for a season, and then I also got to two games that year. The very first game I ever broadcast was here at Penn State. For whatever reason, it was Texas at Penn State, and no network was covering the game. And so the Penn State network produced it, and Guido was the producer. So he was the very first producer I ever had for a live game also. And then later in the season, Penn State had a bye week, and so there was another game that for whatever reason was not being picked up by anybody. It was Iowa at Miami, Florida. And so I got asked to go do that. And when that whole season was over, Guido helped me put together a resume tape. And it was, I mean, I've seen resume tapes. This one was a classy, well done. I mean, Guido wasn't going to put anything out there that wasn't classy. And it had stuff for me in the studio. It had clips from me doing games. We sent it out, and that's where I had the two offers from the Big East and from ESPN, and chose to do the Big East game. But anyway, Guido to this day has remained a mentor, and all through my career, I'd call him and I'd say, hey Guido, watch a game this weekend and give me some feedback. And he'd watch, and he'd take a yellow legal pad out, and he'd jot some notes down. He's constantly tried to help me take my game to the next level, and I am forever indebted to him. And so I would say to any student here that's in broadcasting, if you ever want to be, do some work on camera and get opportunities, if you can find somebody that's in the business or somebody that it could be a relative, it could be a friend, it could be a professor, whatever it is, that will give you honest feedback and will push you to kind of grow, I mean, that it's invaluable if you can find someone like that. Because, even though we're in the communication business, there's not always a lot of, TV's not like a lot of jobs where you have an internship, or you have what is it called when an apprentice, it's not like that. A lot of times you just get thrown in there, and unless you do something really bad or say something really stupid, a lot of times you don't hear anything, and so if you can find somebody that'll give it to you straight, take it. That's an invaluable thing.
It's also a very subjective industry where there could be several executives who really enjoy, anyone's work, but also being able to understand that you may not be, or whoever's in that position may not be everyone's cup of tea.
Yeah, for sure. And I mentioned I did those two games that year. The second game I did, I can't remember. I wish I could remember the guy's name. For some reason, I'm thinking his last name was Nathanson, but it was either producer or director. They hired a bunch of freelance people, and the producer and director team that they hired, I mean, they had done Super Bowls, they had done lots of network TV, and so we had this production meeting like I'm going to have tomorrow at 10. And when we were done, the producer kind of pulled me aside and put his arm around me and said, hey, look, if you don't remember anything else from this meeting today, remember this. The guy next to you, the play-by-play guy, his job is to tell people what happened. Who carried the ball, who made the tackle, what the down and distance is. That's not your job. Your job's not to repeat what he said, and it's not to repeat what we just saw. Your job is to try to answer the question why. Why did this play work? Why didn't it work? Why is the game unfolding this way? Why is the momentum shifting? So my whole career from that point on, I've always had as a goal to answer the question why, which I can't do on every play, but I try the best I can to answer the question why and educate in that way. And to say it in a way that the average fan could understand. I don't want to say it in a way that just only football people could understand, So that's kind of the way I guide how I go about my job, and I think I've been able to do that. I think I have an ability to tell people about things that they're seeing in the game that they maybe couldn't see for themselves or pick up for themselves, and that's always fun for me to be able to do that.
We're going to open it up to audience questions here in just a couple of minutes. One thing that I know you want to touch on as well is, when did you know that you wanted to get into broadcasting? Because you did not start as a communications major when you got here on campus.
Yeah, well, first of all, when I got here, I really didn't know what I was to major in. There was not a broadcast journalism school per se when I came. And so I was in DUS, Division of Undergraduate Studies, for my whole first year, which I was told was fine. I was a good student. I was a very conscientious student, and I had good grades, but I just wasn't sure what direction I wanted to go. And then the spring of my sophomore year, I ended up making the decision to go into speech communications, and kind of with an emphasis in broadcasting, and because that's what I thought that I would want to do. So I had some good classes, and again, at that time when I came here, I had no idea if I was going to play in the NFL or not. I mean, it just was a different world. Nowadays, kids, they start thinking about the NFL when they're in high school. I mean, like, none of us that came here, nobody thought about playing in the NFL until later in your college career, when it looked like you had a chance. So I thought, well, if I play football, great. If I don't, what would I like to do? So I thought, one, I could coach like my dad did, but that's a hard job, and long hours, and away from family, and we moved a lot, because my dad coached. I went to 3 different high schools in 4 years, and we moved about a dozen times when I was growing up, and so that's a hard life. Or maybe broadcasting. And I thought, well, I think I would like that, because I can remember as a kid just playing backyard football or basketball. I would catch myself announcing the game, down to 5 seconds of the game, he's got it shot up, like as I'm playing, and I'm like, okay, maybe I can do that. So, I did an internship at the local TV station, I think maybe the summer between my sophomore and junior and senior year. I remember going to New York on kind of a banquet tour for a while, and I was able to set up, through the help of the Sports Information Office, some interviews with somebody from NBC, ABC, and CBS, and I wrote a paper. This is my project, was, what are you looking for as a football analyst? And so I got some really great feedback of what makes a good analyst, what they look for. But again, I really didn't get a real chance to try it until I was done playing. But it ended up, working out great, and I've ended up being able to do this. I've been at a network level for 30 years, so I've, more than tripled the number of years that I played, and so it's been pretty fun.
One last question for me, and only because you set it up by talking about you're explaining the why, and you don't have a pick for tomorrow's game, but this audience wants to know why Penn State is going to beat West Virginia.
Well, I mean, Penn State should win because they are the better team. I think just West Virginia. Now they're not going to be a pushover, but they're coming off of a 5-7 season. Their coach is definitely feeling some heat. Neil Brown, who I think is a really good football coach, but West Virginia is a very proud football place. Their fan base, they expect to win, and and they haven't won for 4 years, and so I think that there's a lot of heat there, but they've got some good players. But Penn State has got a very, very talented roster. I would say this is James Franklin's most talented roster that he's had in his 10 years. They've got depth on defense. I think their offensive line is as good the last 2 years as it's been since he's been here. They've got 2 outstanding young running backs. And the young quarterback, if he does start tomorrow, he's super talented. He's super talented. I think that fans need to be patient with him. Even if he has a great game in week 1, and puts up great numbers, I would still be patient with him, because there's going to be a trip to Illinois in week 3 and a game against Iowa, in week 4 against some outstanding defenses that will be challenging for him. But he is really talented, and I think he's got a lot of good things ahead of him. So I think they should win because they're the better team, but that's the beauty of college football. You're dealing with 18 to 21-year-old kids, and so you still tee it up and kick it off and see what happens.
Well, now that Sean Clifford left 18 to 21.
Yeah, right.
Todd, by the way, was undefeated against West Virginia during his playing career here at Penn State. So Mike has a microphone. If you raise your hand, we'll take any questions. Go ahead, Mike. You can pass it around.
Yeah.
Just please say your name and introduce yourself.
Oh, yeah, Gene Huddy from the Allentown area, Lehigh Valley. Todd, I really liked when you and Brad Nessler did your broadcast. And I was just wondering if there was any play-by-play person you'd rather call the games with than maybe any other?
Gene, I feel like I've been really fortunate, really blessed to have worked with the guys that I've worked with. Brad was great. I loved working with Brad. He's now with CBS, and he's doing a Big Ten game tomorrow. Ohio State at Indiana. CBS is moving into the Big Ten as well. So I loved working with him, but I loved working with Vern Lundquist. I loved working with Sean McDonough the last 5 years. Mike Patrick was the first guy I worked with when I went back to ESPN. I did games with Mike Tirico, my first go-around at ESPN. Joe Tessitore. I've worked with really, really good people, and they all have different styles, and you have to kind of, figure that out and adapt to the styles. But I've never had a problem with any of them, and I've never, said, well, I really don't like working with that guy. So I've been very, very fortunate, and I gotta believe I'll feel the same way about Noah.
I'm Steve Ross from the law school here. Thank you so much, Scott,
Sure.
for coming here. Students who are not trivia experts may not know, given the matchup and naming the starting quarterback, that Joe Paterno did name the starting quarterback, and the person who was not selected ended up going to West Virginia and then on to a very successful career in the NFL. When you hear about these things, going back to, I guess, your freshman year or maybe your sophomore year, could you talk about what is the real relationship like between two players who are in the room trying to help the team, but there is a
Sure.
competition between them, like with you and Jeff Hostetler, and how did you get along when you were here? And now that it's many years later, you can maybe talk to them more. Everybody always says, "Oh, we're great friends. We only want to help the team." And what is it really like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll talk about my situation first, and then I'll talk about the current, because the landscape is very, very different now than it was then. So Jeff Hostetler was an outstanding high school quarterback from Western PA. He had 2 older brothers that had played here. They were both linebackers. He had a younger brother that was a baseball player here. And Jeff and I came in together in the same recruiting class. And so we're competing, and I ended up getting hurt my freshman year and broke a bone in my hand, and so I redshirted my freshman year. And then starting in that spring of 1980, we were in competition. And it was head-to-head, and no decision made on the quarterback. We go into fall camp, and same thing. We're splitting reps, and Joe Paterno waited till the week of the first game. I mean, I remember it was like a Tuesday or Wednesday. He talked to each one of us individually, and I remember we went somewhere. He took me somewhere. We sat on a park bench, and he told me, that he was going to start Jeff, and figured I'd be upset, and want to compete. I was going to play in each of the first couple games, but that's the way they were going to go. So, I mean, I never even thought about doing anything different, and figured I'd get to play. So we played, the first game we played somebody that we blew out, and, we both played, a decent amount. And then we went to Texas A&M in week 2, and I played a little bit more, and we won, but Jeff played well in that game as well. And then we came back to week 3 and played Nebraska here. and Nebraska beat us. And I ended up playing most of the second half because we were behind, and I think Joe's thinking was I was maybe a better pure passer. Jeff was a better dual threat. You know, he was more athletic than I was. And so anyway, I ended up playing more in week 3, and then in week 4 I became the starter. That was the game with Missouri. And you know, the way you found out that when we used to practice at Penn State, it was really goofy, but you know, we had different colored jerseys. So like the first team offense had light blue jerseys, no numbers on them, just color. The first team defense had, or first team offense had, second team offense had a green jersey. First team defense was dark blue, second team defense was red or something. And during training camp, there was like 5 teams, so 5 different colors. When you got into the fall, there was just first and second team, and then scout team was always white. So anyway, I found out I was a starter when I came in that Monday before the Missouri game. There was a light blue jersey hung in my locker, and I ended up starting the rest of that year. And then Jeff made the decision to transfer to West Virginia at the end of that season. And back then there was no, there were no waivers. I mean, you had to sit out a year to transfer unless you went down a level. And so he sat out the 1981 season, and then came back and had a really nice career at West Virginia. Actually, Don Nealon was the coach at West Virginia, Don Nealon and my dad went to Bowling Green together. We're college athletes together. They coached together in Canton. So I've known Coach Nealon forever. And Jeff Hasse ended up marrying Don Nealon's daughter. So he's part of their family. And Jeff had a great career, and then ended up, I won a national championship here, and he won a Super Bowl with the Giants. So it worked out for both of us. But so that was then, right? And back then, there wasn't as much of an urge to transfer because you automatically knew you had to sit out. There was more of a sense of, all right, if I got beat out, I just got to work harder and got to hang in there and wait my turn, and maybe I'll get my turn. And those days are gone in college football. And nowadays, because of the transfer portal, because you can transfer once and you don't have to sit out. Particularly when you're talking about high-level recruits, 4- and 5-star guys, they're not going to come somewhere and sit more than a year and a half. If they're not playing, they're going to go somewhere else, and it makes it really difficult to build depth at that position on your roster today in college football. It's a real problem, and so, and the reason it's a problem with quarterback and why it's that position more than anything else is, you're going to play a lot of linebackers, right? Because they're going to be on special teams. They're going to rep in. You're going to play running backs and wide receivers. You'll see a bunch of the quarterback. There's just one, and so unless the guy gets hurt, that backup quarterback's not going to play more than like. Now, Penn State was really smart last year in playing Drew Aller in several games. I think he got 60, 65 snaps or something like that. I went back and watched all those snaps. A couple weeks ago, and that was smart, just exposing him to game reps. And even the first game he played against Purdue, which that game was still in question in the third quarter, and he had to go in and play. And but it's just a different time. I mean, guys are not willing to wait their turn, and so it's a two-edged sword. You want to recruit high-level recruits, and you want to have depth at that position, but you're not going to keep 2 high-level quarterbacks very long. It's just kind of the way of the world now.
I want to follow up with one other thought on that. You're talking about playing Pitt and Syracuse and West Virginia. The Big Ten is going to have USC and UCLA, Oregon, Washington. Just the landscape of college sports. And no longer you have so much of those regional matchups. You're playing 9 conference games, and your conference now is going to span from coast to coast.
Literally, from Rutgers to Washington, and so I'm glad we're starting the season. I mean, the realignment stuff has happened all the way up to the start of the season. Like today was the ACC finalized their deal that they're going to bring in Stanford, Cal, and SMU. So I mean, right up to the very beginning of the 23 season, it's been chaotic, you know, in terms of realignment. And, you know, I'm from the Midwest. Penn State was an independent when I played here. My first reactions when Penn State went in the Big Ten, I was not thrilled about it because of those Eastern games that we used to play and the rivalries, and we were kind of the beast of the East, you know, and the Pitt game, you know, in the 3 years that I played, I thought our two teams, we had as many NFL prospects, and that Friday after Thanksgiving, the last game of the year was as good as any rivalry in the country, and that went away, you know, and so, and I also thought recruiting, you know, Penn State now is going to go to Iowa to play, you know, and instead of having all those games on the East Coast, away games, would it hurt recruiting? Well, you know, everything has worked out great. I mean, I think the Big Ten move has ended up being great for football, for all the sports. It's, you know, the academic institution alignment is outstanding. And so I'm not like a traditional Big Ten guy, but I am a traditional football fan, and I hate what happened in the Pac-12. I mean, I really hate what happened to a conference with a rich history and tradition. But I also understand, you know, those decisions are being made, and now being an employee of NBC, I mean, I was excited when I changed to NBC knowing that USC and UCLA were coming in. And then the addition of Oregon and Washington, who are two really good brands and really good football programs. And, you know, so, yeah, you're gonna lose some of that tradition and the old rivalry of the Big Ten maybe, but, I mean, Big Ten fans, Penn State fans, they're gonna love going to Autzen Stadium in Eugene, Oregon for a game, or Husky Stadium in Seattle. I mean, so, I mean, and for us, the cool thing at NBC is it just means more opportunities for great matchups, you know, great primetime game matchups, you know, because those West Coast games are going to fall more conveniently as primetime games than a noon game on Fox or a 3:30 game on CBS. So it's going to open up even more opportunities for big games for us. So I'm thrilled about it.
So you don't think Fox is going to have too many 9 a.m. Pacific?
No, I don't think so. I think Fox will have to wait until those West Coast teams come.
Any questions from the audience? You got one? Go ahead, you can say it, I'll repeat it.
I'll hear you.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I got you. So, Jude Wozniak, a student at Penn State Junior. So, as just a fan of football, I'm entranced by the defensive side of football, and I love how people can fly around. And as a quarterback, there's always someone in the back of your mind that you have to be thinking about. For my opinion, I think for Penn State, it has to be the middle linebacker position with Abdul Carter and Curtis Jacobs. For you, if you are playing now or who you're looking at on the defensive end, and it could be all of college football or on the just Penn State end, who would be that one player that, as a quarterback, would just always be in the back of your mind?
Well, it depends on the team, right? It depends on the opponent. If I was getting ready to play Penn State, first of all, as a quarterback, you're always going to kind of key on the safeties, because if it's a pass play in particular, because they're going to kind of trigger coverage, you know, their movement. So you want to know where they are. You want to recognize if there's any potential pressures that are coming. But in terms of individuals, yeah, I mean, I want to know where Abdul Carter is, and I want to know where Chop Robinson is on this team. You know, if I'm a quarterback, right? Because those guys are guys that can wreck a game plan. They can wreck an offense, and so you need to recognize where game wreckers are. And you know, sometimes you play a team that doesn't really have those guys, right? But when you're playing teams that have guys who can change the course of the game, you have to know where they are and make sure your offensive linemen know where they are, you know, and adjust your protections and whatnot accordingly. Now, the thing that I think is going to be the guy who may have a monster season this year for Penn State is Adisa on the other side of Chop Robinson, because so much attention will be paid to Chop Robinson, and rightfully so. If they don't account for him, he's an outstanding player in his own right. So, you know, that's tough. You know, when you have one on each side, it's really tough. In 1980, when I was a starting quarterback my first year, we lost to Pitt. We beat him my junior year, we beat him my senior year, but we lost to him here 14-9 my sophomore year. And they had two defensive ends that were both college football Hall of Famers. Hugh Green was one defensive end and Ricky Jackson was the other. Ricky Jackson's in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And I mean, it's scary when you got one on each side because you don't ever want to block either one of them with a running back or even a tight end. And if you put a tackle on them, then that means you're blocking 5-on-5 and you're still putting your tackles on a tough spot with no help. So when you have a great pass rusher on either side, it's a problem.
And then good luck throwing against Kalen King and Dick
Right.
Dixon, Miller, question back. Go.
Hey, how's it going, Todd?
Hey.
Jake, current student, Penn State junior. When you talked about when you're analyzing a game and you're breaking it down, you're not like the play-by-play guy. You're more of like the explain a play, why something worked or why it didn't. Do you ever find it difficult, like since you were a former quarterback, to be like you try and get inside the mind of the QB, you watching on offense, saying like what he's thinking or what he's seeing, and then do you have an easy time explaining it to the audience, or do you find it difficult sometimes? You just like, oh, I see this route run this way and this guy going that way, where some people might not understand it.
I don't think I have a hard time with that. Like my style is not the same as Tony Romo's style. That's a little bit more sounds like Tony Romo. But I think that I can explain it, and answer that question. The one thing I do try to do, which I think Tony Romo has done a really good job of this as well, is I try to anticipate. Replays are great, and that's a tool for the analyst or the telestrator, is to explain why this play worked and why it didn't. But the telestrator, you can take the audience's eyes to a place and show, watch this guy, watch his reaction, right? And that's how you can answer the question why. But replays are always looking back on what just happened. I like to balance that with trying to look ahead. What do I anticipate they might try to do? Who have they not gotten the ball to in the last couple of possessions that if they want to win, they need to find a way to get them the football, So I'm always trying to think forward as well, and project a little bit and not just look back at what just happened.
Cool, thank you. You got it over here.
Hi Todd, how are you?
Good, how are you?
My name's Tom, I'm a junior journalism major, one of
Okay.
Brian's interns.
Okay.
You talked about having Guido as a mentor and
Yeah.
consistently wanting feedback even through your years of being a broadcaster. From your perspective, where have you grown the most as a broadcaster?
Well, I think in doing that, what I was just talking about, the answering the question why, and just being comfortable, it's just like the more reps you get, the more comfortable you get, because ultimately, when I'm doing a broadcast, I'm on the air for 3.5 hours for a game, and I want it to seem as conversational as possible, right? So it's a conversation between Noah and me and the audience, and I want my personality to come through, just like I think my personality is coming through tonight. There's a little bit of humor, there's serious, there's stories, and that's what you want in a broadcast too. So the more you do it, right, the more you have a chance for your personality to come through. And that would be the other piece of advice that I would give to any aspiring young broadcaster. Find a mentor, and any chance you get to do something on air in any form or fashion, and that you can get recorded or taped or whatever, do it. Bank as many reps as you can, because the more you do it, right, the more you do it, the more comfortable you become, and the better you become.
And way easier now that you just have a cell phone. You can literally
Right.
sit at your own
That's
TV
right.
and record yourself.
That's right.
We have time for one more. Go ahead, Mike, you pick.
Student?
Pressure's on you.
Hi Todd.
Hey,
I'm Ryan Esslinger. I'm a broadcast journalism student here. I'm a junior. If you were given the opportunity to, say, broadcast another sport, say baseball, or even in the NFL at like a more pro level, would you have taken that over consistently broadcasting college football, or is college football kind of like a different animal in this aspect of like broadcasting, like bigger games, bigger like prime time? Like, bigger stakes, I guess?
So, first of all, as far as other sports, I think I could do other sports. You know, playing football, basketball, and baseball in high school. Basketball is my favorite sport. I coached high school basketball for 12 years. I wasn't very good, but I coached. And I love the game. You know, I have a son who's a college baseball player now. My dad was a college baseball player. So I think I could speak, you know, well enough about, you know, other sports. The problem is when you're an analyst as opposed to a play-by-play guy, you are sold to the audience as an expert in that sport, right? So it would be hard for me to cross over, whereas a play-by-play guy can go from one sport to the next because he's the traffic cop, right? He's telling you the what. He's not answering the why. And so it's harder to make that transition. I'm hoping maybe during my time at NBC that there might be something, you know, Olympic related or something that's far enough removed from football that I could just be a broadcaster and do, you know? So we'll see. As far as college football over pro football, look, I know where my bread is buttered, okay? College football is where I carved my niche, doing college football. The NFL is better football, right? From top to bottom, it's better players, but I'll take college football every day of the week, okay? I don't think the NFL is nearly as fun to watch until the playoffs. Now the playoffs, that's different, okay? That ratchets up a couple notches, but week in and week out, I love the energy of a college campus, the bands, the pageantry, the rivalries, all of it. I love being on a campus for a college football game, and it's different being in an NFL stadium on a Sunday. It's just not the same. The tailgating's not the same. The atmosphere is not the same. The line at the creamery is not the same. The line at the waffle shops on Sunday mornings not the same, right? So, I mean, I just love everything that there is about it. I'll give you a perfect example. So, I don't remember what year it was, but I'm working for CBS. And CBS, because they did US Open tennis, we didn't do an SEC game. We didn't come on the air until week 3 of the college football season. So I'm sitting at home, it's like week 1. And we're gonna have a game in week 2. So it's week 1, I'm home because we're doing tennis. And I get a call. I'm Saturday afternoon watching college football. I get a call, and CBS says, "Hey, is there any way you could get yourself to Indianapolis?" Phil Simms had to have emergency appendectomy surgery, and he was the #1 analyst on the game, and he can't do the game. We need somebody to fill in. I said, "Yeah, I mean, I can get to Indy." So I got a flight. I got out there late Saturday, did the game on Sunday. It's the #1 team, you know. So I'm working with Gumbel, and we're doing, you know, it's the Colts and the Raiders, I think, and it was fine. It went well. It was a full house, but the atmosphere was just so in the old dome, not Lucas Oil. And so the very next week, I had my first game in the SEC for CBS, and it was a 3:30 game, and it was Tennessee at Florida. And I mean, the swamp, it was hot and sticky and so loud and so electric, and I'm like, there's no comparison. There is no comparison between what I experienced in Sunday on Indianapolis and here in the swamp. So I love college football, and you know, I hope to do it for as long as I can.
Well, that's all the time we have with Todd. As he said, he has some meetings tonight still, but I know Mark wanted to come up, and we have a Nittany Lion statue, and we also want to do some quick photos with Todd. So come on up.
Well, thank you for being here. We really appreciate you kicking off the Football Fridays. So you probably have 1 or 2 Nittany Lions.
I got a big one out my backyard.
You can never have too many.
No.
Thank you so much for kicking off our series. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.